Sergeant Cal Monroe had learned one thing in his years on patrol. Ranger didn't bark for no reason. It was a quiet stretch of Highway 63, just outside the town of Red Ridge, Montana. A place where porch lights were left on out of habit, and the biggest excitement was a lost cow wandering into traffic. Cal liked it that way. Predictable, calm, clean. Tonight wasn't that. The sun had long slipped below the horizon, and the night air was thick with pine and dust. The patrol SUV rolled along the two-lane blacktop, tires humming over asphalt still warm from the day. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, his tan and black coat catching the glow of the dash light. 5 years in service, nearly 50 deployments, and a record that made younger K-9 handlers envious. But it wasn't the stats that made Ranger special, it was his instincts. When Ranger went still, Cal lifted his foot from the gas. When he growled low and deep, Cal reached for the spotlight. When he barked, just once, sharp and commanding, Cal's hand moved to his sidearm. The SUV was parked on the gravel shoulder ahead. No lights, no movement. Newer model, dark green, clean. Not a single dent. A vehicle like that didn't just sit here, and yet it did. Windows tinted black. No license plate. The engine was off, but the metal still ticked with heat. Cal slowed to a stop and clicked the spotlight on. The beam hit the rear bumper. There, half peeled, was a faded decal of a smiling blue bear mascot, its cartoon eyes wide and toothy. Ranger growled again. Cal's brow furrowed. He radioed it in, routine check, likely abandoned. Dispatch logged it, no urgency in their tone. But Cal's gut disagreed. So did Ranger. "Stay," Cal said out of habit. But Ranger didn't stay. He lunged toward the back gate, claws tapping rapid-fire on the steel floor of the cargo area, his tail stiff, ears pinned forward. Cal popped the latch. Ranger leapt to the ground and made a beeline for the SUV's rear. He circled once, nose twitching, then planted himself by the trunk, sitting back on his haunches with that locked-in stare Cal knew too well. The kind of stare that said, "You need to see this." Cal walked slow, flashlight out, senses sharp. The SUV was locked, all doors tight. No sign of forced entry, no keys in sight. He tried the trunk handle. Nothing. Then came that smell. Faint, but wrong. Not road dust, not old upholstery. Something like sweat and plastic and fear. He pulled out his multi-tool, jammed it under the edge of the liftgate, and worked the latch. It gave with a creak. The smell hit harder now. Sour, hot. At first glance, it looked like someone had crammed a costume into the back. Oversized blue and white fur, a mascot head tipped sideways, foam tongue sticking out in a goofy grin. The body was curled, stuffed into itself, like someone had balled up a sleeping bag and shoved it into a too-small sack. Ranger didn't move, just let out one low whine. Cal reached forward and lifted, the headpiece. What he saw made his breath hitch. Beneath the synthetic fur and fabric was skin, small, pale, bruised. He dropped to his knees and tore at the costume's chest, pulling back layers of polyester and duct tape until a tiny face emerged. A girl. No older than 3. Eyes closed. Lips dry and cracked. Arms bound with silver tape. Chest rising barely. She was alive. Cal fumbled for his radio. "Dispatch, I need EMS at my location. I've got a live child in critical condition. Repeat, child found, conscious but unresponsive, trunk of a green Yukon. Get me everyone." The response crackled, but he didn't hear it. His focus stayed locked on the child. She was curled like a doll that had been discarded. A tiny stuffed bear was clutched in her taped hands, one eye missing, fur matted. He reached out, peeled the tape from her legs as gently as he could. "Hey there," he whispered. "You're okay now. We got you." She didn't respond. Behind him, Ranger stepped forward and lay down beside the girl, his large frame close but careful. He didn't sniff. He didn't lick. He just rested his head next to hers. Her fingers moved, just barely, just enough to touch the fur of his neck. That's when her eyes opened. Dark brown, wide, unfocused. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked at Ranger like she knew him, like he was the only thing in the world that made sense. The first EMTs arrived 4 minutes later. Cal stood back as they worked, though Ranger stayed where he was until one medic gently nudged him aside. They lifted the girl onto the stretcher, oxygen mask already in place. Cal walked beside them, his boots crunching on gravel. "Any ID?" a young paramedic asked. Cal shook his head. "Nothing. No wallet, no plate, no missing persons alert that I know of, Jesus." The medic muttered. "What kind of sick bastard does this?" Ranger let out another bark then, loud and sharp. Not toward the girl, toward the empty road behind them. Cal turned, hand instinctively moving toward his belt. But there was nothing. No cars, no lights. Just the darkness, and the echo of Ranger's bark fading into the trees. Later, after the girl had been airlifted to Billings General and the SUV towed to the precinct garage, Cal sat on the station steps with Ranger beside him. He held the Mascot head in his lap. The foam grin looked warped in the flickering lamplight. On the inside of the costume, sewn near the neck, he spotted something. A stitch of red thread. Letters. Numbers. He held it up closer. B407KIDMTA code. Maybe an inventory. Maybe something worse. Ranger let out a low growl, not at anything visible, but as if he could sense something far beyond the edge of town. Something watching. Cal looked down at his partner. "You knew," he said softly. Ranger blinked. That was the night it all began. And that little girl in the costume, she didn't just survive. She blew open a door that someone had tried to weld, shut, and neither Cal Monroe nor Ranger would ever be the same again. The hospital hallway smelled like antiseptic and tension. Cal Monroe leaned against the cold wall outside Pediatric Trauma Room 3, arms crossed, eyes locked on the observation window. Inside, the girl sat upright in the hospital bed, tiny frame wrapped in a fresh blanket. 4 in one arm, oxygen clipped to her nose. She hadn't spoken a word since they'd pulled her from that costume. Not to the ER nurses, not to the on-call psychologist, not even to the pediatrician who'd spent 20 minutes kneeling beside her, whispering about butterflies and cartoons. She just stared straight ahead. Unblinking. Cal had seen shock before, saw it in soldiers returning home with haunted eyes, in victims of roadside crashes, even once in a kid who watched her father overdose in a McDonald's parking lot. But this wasn't shock. This was something colder, like the part of her that spoke had been locked away long ago. Dr. Mira Halverson stood beside him, flipping through a slim chart. Her brow was pinched. Vitals are holding. Some dehydration, light bruising on the torso and wrists, consistent with restraint. No internal injuries, no sign of sexual assault, thank God. But... She trailed off. "But what?" Cal asked. "She doesn't flinch," the doctor said quietly. "Doesn't react to touch. Not when we moved her, not when we checked her IV. That's not nothing." "She's 3, Cal said. "She should be crying for her mom." Dr. Halverson nodded slowly. "Unless she doesn't know she has one." Silence settled between them. "Any hits on the ID yet?" Cal asked. "No," she said. "Nothing. We ran facial recognition through the National Missing Children's Database, statewide reports, regional Amber Alerts, birth records, insurance claims, hospital admissions. She's not in any system. It's like she doesn't exist." Cal's jaw tightened. "Everyone exists somewhere." "Not always," the doctor said. "Some kids are born off-grid. Unregistered. Hidden Cal looked through the glass again. The girl hadn't moved. The bear in her lap, missing an eye, was still clutched in her small hands like a lifeline. Behind them, the elevator dinged. Footsteps approached. Cal didn't turn. "She still hasn't spoken," a voice said behind him. It was Lena Voss, his closest friend on the force, now in plain clothes with her badge clipped to her belt. "Not a word. But there's something you need to see." Cal followed her down the hallway to the nurse's station. Lena pulled up a screen on the hospital's secure terminal, turning it toward him. "This is from the cruiser dashcam," she said, "right before EMS arrived." The video played. Cal watched himself kneel beside the girl. Ranger sat next to her. Then, just as the paramedics began to approach, her hand moved. Not toward California, toward Ranger. She buried her fingers in the thick fur of his neck and didn't let go until they lifted her onto the stretcher. She didn't blink the entire ride, Lena said, but the moment they tried to take Ranger away from her, she panicked. Kicked, fought. They had to let him ride with her in the ambulance. "That dog, he's the only one she trusts. He's not just a dog," Cal said. "He's the only one who knew she was in that damn costume." Back at the room, the girl still hadn't spoken. But when Ranger walked in beside Cal, she shifted. Just a little. Enough. Ranger approached the bed slowly, stopping short, ears flicked back, tail low. Cal waited, watched. She reached out. No hesitation. Her fingers touched Ranger's cheek and rested there. No tears, just that silent connection. Cal crouched next to the bed. "Hey," he said gently. "Remember me?" She didn't answer. Her hand stayed on Ranger. "We're not going to let anything happen to you. You're safe now." Her eyes, wide and glassy, flicked toward him for a fraction of a second before returning to the dog. Ranger didn't move, didn't make a sound. He just stayed. And that seemed to be all she needed. A soft knock came at the door. Lena stepped in, holding a USB stick in one hand. "Security footage," she said. "You're going to want to see this." In the nurse's break room, they plugged it into the laptop. Footage from a gas station, time-stamped 2 nights earlier. A tall man in a grey hoodie stepped out of the same Yukon. He filled the tank. Then he opened the rear hatch. They watched him lift the Mascot costume, unzip it and shove something inside. Then he zipped it shut and patted it down. Like it was cargo. Cal's stomach turned. He knew exactly what he was doing. Lena muttered. "He packed her like luggage." "No license plate," Cal said. "No distinguishing marks. Same bare decal on the bumper." "There's more," Lena said, pulling up another file. "The SUV's VIN comes back stolen." Owner filed the report last week. It was taken from a church parking lot during a Sunday service. Cal's jaw flexed. He didn't even use his own vehicle. He sat down, hands gripping the edge of the table. "This isn't a one-time grab," he said. "This is something else. You think trafficking? I think logistics." Silence fell again. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling against the hospital windows. Somewhere in the distance, a chopper passed overhead. Cal looked up at the screen, freezing the frame on the Mascot's stitched smile, the child packed inside it. "Someone thought that was normal?" he said. "Someone thought that made sense." Lena nodded. "Which means there's more out there." Cal looked out the window towards the cruiser parked below. Ranger sat inside, staring up like he already knew. And maybe he did. Because some barks weren't about fear. They were warnings. And this one, this bark, was only the beginning. The Mascot costume lay, stretched across the evidence table, stripped of its false cheer. Under fluorescent light, the blue bear's oversized head looked grotesque. Its foam grin now twisted, its glassy plastic eyes reflecting nothing but sterile walls and silence. Cal Monroe stood beside it, arms crossed, jaw tight. Ranger sat near the doorway of the evidence room, watching quietly. Always watching. Lena Voss hovered over the Mascot's torso with gloved hands, tweezers in one, flashlight in the other. "You know what's messed up?" she said, voice low. "It still smells like plastic and cotton candy, like a kid's party gone wrong." Cal didn't answer. He was staring at the stitching along the neckline, where the duct tape had been ripped away. "There," Lena muttered. "See that?" She pointed with the tweezers. Cal leaned in. A single thread. Red. Sloppy enough to be handmade, but deliberate. B407K IDMT. She read aloud. "Same thing you saw last night." "Could be anything." Cal said. "Serial number, asset tag, or a route code." Lena said. "Hang on." She pulled her phone from her back pocket and tapped rapidly. Ranger shifted beside the door but didn't move. His ears were perked forward, head tilted, like he was following the thought before Cal even caught up. "You ever heard of Bright Future Kids Foundation?" Lena asked. "No, sounds like a daycare." Cal said. "It's not. It's a non-profit registered out of Nevada. I checked the EIN. They don't file financials, but they've hosted youth events in 3 states over the past 6 months. You'll love this. Every one of those events had a mascot." "Guess what kind? Blue Bear," Cal said. "Bingo, and look at this." She turned the screen toward him. "Event flyer from a T-ball tournament in Helena last month, sponsored by Bright Future Kids. Their mascot? Benny the Bear. Same design, same colors." "Jesus," Cal murmured. "That's not all," Lena said. "There's a pattern. They pop up around small events with minimal media coverage. Little parades, community festivals, mostly rural towns. No one checks the backgrounds on a non-profit showing up to hand out balloons. And if someone gets taken," Cal started. "There's no record they were ever there in the first place." Lena finished. He stepped back from the table, suddenly cold despite the warm hum of the room. "You're saying this isn't just a one-off? This is a delivery schedule," she said. "Only the packages are kids." Ranger gave a low growl, almost a hum, as if he understood what they'd just said. Lena turned back to the mascot suit, flipping the fur inside out along the midsection. "There's reinforced stitching here," she said. "Industrial grade. You wouldn't need that unless you were carrying weight." Cal finished. "A body." He thought of the little girl, her limbs bound, her breathing shallow, her hand clutching. Ranger like he was the only solid thing left in the world. She had been stuffed inside this, like she was cargo. Ranger let out a huff. Lena opened a folder she'd brought from her desk. Inside were printouts. "I cross-checked known events that featured mascot appearances with unsolved missing children cases in rural areas. Most came up empty, but two stood out." She slid them across the table. First case, Wyatt J., age 6, disappeared from a county fair in Idaho last April. Witnesses remember a person in a green dragon mascot costume walking near the exit with a group of kids. No one thought to stop it. Second case, Maya L., age 5, vanished from a charity run in Butte. Event was hosted by a group called Little Steps Forward. No tax filings. Mascot at the event? A yellow dog with a red cap, smiling. Both gone without a trace. Both within 2 days of a Bright Future Kids event. "You seeing it now?" Lena asked. Cal nodded slowly. "They're hiding kids in plain sight." Lena sat down hard on the metal stool, rubbing her forehead. "It's not just random abductions. It's a route. It's clean. It's practiced." Cal looked at the mascot again. This time he saw something else. Logistics, fabric, stitching, breathable mesh. Everything designed not for fun, but for concealment. Ranger moved closer to the table, nose lowering toward the base of the costume. He sniffed once, then again. Then sat back and stared at a specific seam near the leg. "What is it, buddy?" Cal asked. Lena leaned in with the flashlight. "Wait, there's something wedged in here." She used the tweezers to extract it. A small tag, no bigger than a postage stamp, laminated. Cal took it. On the back, a barcode. On the front, a cartoon drawing of the same blue bear, but this time holding a balloon with the date September 14th. "No location," Lena said, frowning. "We find the event." Cal said, voice low. "We find the next drop." He walked over to the whiteboard in the corner and began sketching out dates, locations, tags, and events. Ranger followed, lying down in the corner but never taking his eyes off the suit. "This is a machine," Cal muttered. "One running in the shadows of school fundraisers and bake sales." "And we just tore the curtain," Lena said. Ranger shifted again. Outside the evidence room, the hallway was quiet. But in here, everything had changed. What they'd thought was a rescue was just the beginning. Now they had a map. Now they had a code. And somewhere out there, another child was already packed and waiting. The morning sky over Whitefish, Montana was a postcard blue, uninterrupted, endless, too beautiful to match the weight Cal Monroe carried in his chest. The local kids' soccer tournament had drawn in half the town. Parents with lawn chairs and plastic coffee mugs, teenagers selling hot dogs from a concession stand, and the sound of referee whistles slicing the air like clockwork. But Cal wasn't watching the game. He stood near the parking lot, arms crossed, sunglasses on, and Ranger at his side in full K9 vest. Every few seconds, the dog's nose lifted to the breeze. Ranger was different today, tense but focused. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't scanning. He was listening in that deep, internal way that made Cal trust him more than any equipment on his belt. Lena's voice came through the earpiece. "Security just confirmed. Bright Future Kids is listed as one of today's sponsors. Mascot scheduled to appear at halftime." Cal scanned the field again. "Copy that. Any visual?" "Negative. But keep eyes on the maintenance staff." A couple unmarked trucks came in through the back gate. No paperwork. Cal reached down and tapped Ranger's side. "Let's work." They moved along the perimeter of the field, past clusters of parents, through the edge of the parking lot, and toward the maintenance zone behind the equipment shed. That's when Ranger stopped. It was subtle. A shift in his posture, ears forward, nose low, then a step, then another. He veered toward a cluster of stacked plastic storage bins lined near the shed wall. Cal followed. One of the bins was too new, not scuffed, not labeled, locked with a single zip tie, industrial gray. Ranger sniffed, circled, then sat. His tail didn't wag, his eyes locked forward. Cal's hand moved to his radio. "Lena, South Perimeter. We've got something." Before she could reply, a man in a maintenance uniform turned the corner behind the shed. Mid-40s, thin, pale, pushing an empty dolly. The moment he saw Cal, his eyes flicked to the bin, then to Ranger. Then he ran. Cal gave chase instantly. White male, grey coveralls, headed east toward the playground. Ranger was already moving, paws pounding on the grass, ears flat. The man darted between bleachers, past screaming kids and startled parents. He shoved a picnic table, knocking over a tray of Gatorade, and bolted towards the exit gate. He didn't make it. Ranger launched. Mid-air takedown. The man hit the ground with a shout as Ranger's jaws clamped down on his arm, holding firm but controlled. Cal reached them seconds later, cuffing the man while Ranger released on command and backed off, still growling. "I want a lawyer." The man spat, face in the dirt. "You'll get one," Cal muttered. "But first, we're opening that bin." Lena arrived breathless, eyes darting. "He had keys?" "No, just panic." They jogged back to the storage bin. Cal sliced the zip tie with his knife, lifted the lid, and stopped. Inside was a folded blue bear mascot costume, and beneath it, wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, was a small boy. 4 years old, maybe, barefoot, unconscious, his wrists bound with tape, his lips cracked, but he was breathing. "Oh my God," Lena whispered. Cal lifted the boy gently, checking his pulse. Still there, weak but steady. Ranger stayed close, pressed against Cal's leg, eyes locked on the child like he knew. This one mattered. EMS was already en route. Lena called in the rest. 20 minutes later, the boy was on his way to the hospital. The man, identified as Paul Heller, no priors, no digital footprint, was in custody. But he wasn't talking. Not a single word. No ID, no driver's license. The name might not even be real. Back at the station, they inventoried the bin and suit. Inside the mascot head, another red-stitched code. B423KIDWF. Lena read. Whitefish. She pointed at the schedule on the whiteboard they'd built back at the precinct. That matches the next date in the pattern. They're not just trafficking, Cal said, staring at the suit. They're tagging, routing, branding. And this guy? Lena asked. He's a mule. Cal nodded. And probably expendable. Ranger paced behind them, unsettled. Cal turned to Lena. Run everything we've got on Bright Future Kids and cross-check any non-profits using similar mascot appearances. I want every town they've touched in the last year. What about the kid? She asked. Cal glanced at the clock. He's still listed as John Doe. No missing person report filed. No match on any national database. Ranger whined low, then sat beside the chair where the new mascot suit rested. Cal crouched next to him. What is it, boy? Ranger pawed once at the costume, then looked up at him with amber eyes, tired, alert, insistent. Another one, Cal whispered. Lena looked over. What? Cal stood. He's telling us something. This isn't isolated. This was meant to happen today, in public, with cameras. But they didn't expect him. He looked at Ranger. They never do. Outside, the sun had begun to set. Kids were heading home with their parents, unaware of what had been stopped 20 yards from the field. And somewhere, another mascot was being prepped, another bin packed, another child readied. But now they had a scent. And Ranger? He wasn't done tracking, not even close. The lights glittered across the Grand Cypress Hall in Spokane, like it was hosting royalty. Champagne flutes clinked, polished shoes clicked against marble, and music floated above the crowd with an almost syrupy charm. The annual Children's Empowerment Gala was in full swing, donors mingling with school board officials, non-profit directors handing out glossy brochures, and television crews sweeping slow pans of painted murals drawn by school children. Cal Monroe wasn't here to drink or clap. He stood near the back wall, eyes scanning beneath his ball cap, a dark suit jacket pulled over his vest. Ranger walked calmly at his side, leash in hand but loose. The dog's vest was marked K9, but subtle enough not to draw too much attention in a crowd that preferred their justice quiet and sanitized. You good? Lena's voice came through the earpiece. She was stationed in the security van out back, parked near the catering. Trucks, Cal replied under his breath. So far. But Ranger's on edge. The dog's nose twitched with every passerby, every plate of hors d'oeuvres. He wasn't sniffing for food. He was tracking scent trails layered thick and strange. Ranger kept glancing toward the eastern corridor of the building, toward a hallway marked staff only. Cal watched the same hall. He hadn't seen anyone come out of it in the last 20 minutes. But he'd seen 4 go in. Then Ranger stopped walking. He stood frozen. Ears up, body tense, not barking, just listening. Cal tightened his grip on the leash. Talk to me, partner. Ranger moved, not rushed, but deliberate. He led Cal straight toward the staff hallway. No hesitation. A tuxedoed security guard stepped in front of the door. "Sir, that's a restricted area." Cal flashed his badge. "Sergeant Monroe." Spokane PD routine check. "I wasn't notified. I don't need to be." Behind him, Ranger let out one low, guttural growl. The guard flinched. Not from fear, but something else. Recognition. Cal noticed it, logged it. He brushed past. The hallway shifted immediately, dimmer, colder. No music, no laughter, just the hum of ventilation and the faint scent of bleach. Halfway down, Ranger stopped at a double door. He sat, waited. Cal put his hand on the knob. Locked. He knocked once. Silence. Then a sound. A dull thud, like something hitting a soft surface. Cal didn't wait. He jammed his emergency override tool into the frame and popped the lock. Inside was a room that didn't belong at a gala. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A makeshift stage stood at the far wall, framed by velvet curtains. A podium. Folded chairs. A single overhead camera pointed towards the center. And on stage, standing upright in a spotlight, was a mascot costume, yellow and green, stylized like a cartoon giraffe. Cal's gut turned to ice. To the left of the stage, a sharply dressed man with a microphone spoke in a calm, practiced tone. "This next lot is especially rare. No registration, no public schooling, completely off-grid." He gestured toward the costume. "No bruises, no behavior issues. 5 years old." The room was filled with maybe 30 people, all in suits and gowns, all watching like this was some kind of art auction. Cal stepped forward and shouted, "Police! Hands where I can see them!" Ranger broke leash before Cal even finished. The room exploded into chaos. Chairs clattered. Screams rose. Several attendees bolted for the side exits. The man with the mic ducked behind the curtain. Ranger leapt onto the stage, teeth bared, tail straight. Cal ran up the stairs 2 at a time and reached the mascot suit. His hands tore at the zipper down the back. Inside, curled in a fetal position, was a little girl. Eyes open, silent, but alive. She looked up at him, then past him, to Ranger, who now stood guard at the edge of the stage, growling at anyone who moved too close. "It's okay," Cal whispered. "You're safe now." He lifted her into his arms. She was shaking, but not crying. Her hands clutched a piece of fabric. Another mascot tag. This one stained. Down below, Lena burst in with uniformed officers. The room was already half empty, the wealthier attendees slipping out into black cars before the press could arrive. Cal walked off the stage with the girl still in his arms. "She's breathing," he said. "No visible trauma." "But she's drugged." Ranger trotted beside him, never looking away from the crowd. Back outside, ambulance lights flickered against the front of the building. Reporters began to arrive. Too late to catch the worst of it, but early enough to film Cal carrying the girl to the waiting EMTs, with Ranger walking in stride beside him. Later, back at the precinct, Lena handed Cal a printout. "Found the non-profit that rented this venue," she said. "Shell organization, registered out of Delaware. No board members listed, no trace after today." Cal nodded. "Of course." "And the guy with the mic? Gone?" Cal sat in silence. Ranger rested at his feet, eyes open. "We hit a node," Cal said finally. "One branch." Lena hesitated. "You think there are more?" "I think this was just the clean one," he replied. "The real show happens elsewhere." Outside, the world moved on. Inside, Ranger didn't sleep that night. Neither did Cal. The press didn't stick around long. Within 48 hours of the Spokane Gala bust, headlines that had burned bright. K9 stops child auction, undercover cop disrupts exploitation ring, vanished from the front pages. TV anchors switched topics. Online stories were archived or buried under layers of fluff. At first, Cal thought maybe people just didn't want to believe what they'd seen. Then the FBI showed up. 3 agents in tailored suits. No warmth, no small talk. They walked into the Coyote County Sheriff's office like they already owned it. Led by Agent Curtis Lane, mid-50s, military haircut, eyes that scanned like they were always assessing threats. He shook Cal's hand without looking him in the eye. "We appreciate your work here, Sergeant Monroe," Lane said, monotone. "We'll take it from here." Cal didn't let go. "She's still in the hospital. We're aware. She hasn't said a word." But she reached for Ranger. "That's not admissible." Cal stared at him. "She's not a witness." "She's a child." Lane didn't flinch. "Our team will coordinate with local agencies. We'll process the data, track any leads. You've done your part." Ranger stood beside Cal like a statue, ears slightly pulled back. Lane glanced at the dog. "You'll be debriefed." Soon then the agents took the files. All of them. Photos, maps, tags, witness notes, everything Cal and Lena had built. Gone. 3 days later, Cal sat at his desk staring at an empty caseboard. Just white cork and pushpins. Lena dropped into the seat across from him. "I got locked out of our shared drive." "Same," Cal said. "They shut it all down." "I called the gala venue," Lena continued. "They said their internal camera footage was erased. Federal request." Same with the rental company that brought in the stage. Everyone's clammed up, like it never happened. No, like someone made it never happen outside. A siren wailed in the distance, brief and sharp. Inside, silence settled again. Ranger lay near the door but hadn't slept in 2 days. He paced more, growled at empty doorways, spent long minutes staring at the corners of rooms like something was hiding just beyond the light. Cal noticed Ranger was always alert, but this was different. Sharper, almost hunted. "You feel it too," Cal whispered. "They buried it." Ranger shifted, laid his head on his paws, but his eyes didn't close. That night, Cal stayed late. The station was quiet, just the hum of old ceiling fans and distant keyboard clatter. Lena had gone home, reluctantly. Cal sat in the evidence room, flicking through what little he'd managed to save. Photocopies, screenshots, handwritten notes. He opened the thumb drive Lena had slipped him earlier that day. "I copied this before they took the laptops," she'd said. Inside, a single folder, encrypted. But Cal had the passphrase. The folder opened to a spreadsheet. Rows of numbers and names, dozens. Some were nicknames, obvious code, but others weren't masked at all. Email addresses, donor IDs, offshore routing numbers. Then came a tab labeled Buyers. Cal clicked. He felt the blood drain from his face. Congressmen, corporate VPs, foreign diplomats, 2 state judges, a former foster care director from Nevada, all listed with aliases and delivery preferences, payment confirmations, event attendance logs. A separate column tracked children, age, gender, appearance, handling notes. It was a sales database. And the gala? Just one of many. A soft noise made him turn. Ranger was standing now, tail stiff, staring at the hallway beyond the room. His ears twitched, hackles raised. "Easy," Cal said quietly. But he stood too. He turned off the monitor and removed the USB, tucking it into his front pocket. If someone was watching, they'd have nothing. Outside, nothing moved, but Cal trusted Ranger more than silence. That night, he didn't go home. He took Ranger and drove out to a friend's cabin 2 hours north. No cell service, no internet, just pine trees and gravel crunch under tires. Ranger didn't sleep. Neither did Cal. The next morning, Cal checked his mailbox back at home. Inside was a plain envelope. No return address. Just one photo. A picture of Cal and Ranger standing outside the Spokane precinct, taken from across the street. Behind the photo, a note. "You've seen enough. Stay quiet. Keep the dog safe." Ranger sniffed the envelope, then growled low, steady. It didn't stop until Cal dropped it in the fire pit and burned it. Back inside, he reinforced the door locks, checked the windows, installed a new security cam above the porch. He didn't tell Lena, didn't trust the channel. But that night, as he sat on the floor beside Ranger, hand resting on the dog's side, he made a decision. They weren't burying anything. Not while Ranger still watched the dark. Not while he could still hear a child's whisper that never made it to a police report. This wasn't over. And deep down, Ranger knew it too. The decision wasn't made in some dramatic flash of rebellion. It happened over burnt coffee and silence. Cal, Lena, and Ranger sat around a scarred wooden table inside a hunting cabin an hour outside Kalispell. Cell phones were off, battery packs unplugged, every laptop on airplane mode. Nothing went online anymore, not since the envelope, not since the FBI sealed the case and told them to stand down. "They're not going to stop us," Lena said, breaking the quiet. "But they'll slow us. Bury us in procedure. Drown us in chain of command until the next child disappears." Cal didn't look up. "Then we go around them." They didn't write it down, didn't say it twice. But that day, the three of them disappeared. Not from the world, just from the system. A week later, they were already following a new lead. It came from a social worker Lena had known years ago, a woman named Darla, who worked deep in the state foster network and had seen things she wasn't supposed to. A wellness summer camp had been set up outside Colville. Unregistered, cash-based, claimed to offer overnight outdoor education for at-risk youth. But the location didn't match the permit. The building was an old abandoned church, miles from any paved road. Darla had tried to inspect it. She was turned away at the gate. 3 days later, she texted Lena one word: "Run." The sun hadn't risen yet when Cal and Lena parked a mile out and approached the property on foot. Ranger moved with them, silent, his steps sure in the brush. The church loomed ahead, stone walls weathered, cross missing, one side of the roof caved inward. But there were lights on inside, and movement. Ranger paused near a tree line and sniffed the air. Low growl. "Talk to me," Cal whispered, crouching. Ranger stepped forward, nose tracking something down the slope. They followed him around to the back. That's when they heard it. A child's voice. Muffled, short. Then a second. Lena unslung the camera from her shoulder and zoomed in through a cracked stained glass window. 2 children sat on the floor inside a room lined with sleeping bags. 1 boy, 1 girl, both under 10. Pale, quiet, unmoving. Next to them, propped in the corner, was another Mascot costume. But this one was different, sleeker, flashier. The head was shaped like a smiling fox in sunglasses, with the logo of a fake influencer brand printed across its hoodie. "Stream Savvy Squad." Ranger tensed. Cal pulled back. "They're updating their front." "TikTok bait," Lena whispered. "They're getting smarter." They circled the church slowly, using Ranger's nose and a wireless thermal scanner Lena had rigged to a tablet. There were 3 adults inside, 1 near the back exit, 2 near the kids, too far for a direct takedown. They had to make it fast. Cal counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. He kicked the back door in. Ranger surged through the opening, a blur of muscle and focus. Lena was right behind, flashlight up, voice shouting clear commands. The man at the back door barely had time to turn before Ranger barreled into him. The takedown was clean, controlled. The man dropped with a grunt, arms pinned beneath the weight of 100 pounds of purpose. Inside, the other two adults froze. Cal had his sidearm drawn. "Hands where I can see them!" One reached for his waistband. Ranger barked, sharp, thunderous, and the man stopped cold. Lena rushed to the kids, checking for injuries. Both were conscious but groggy. Drugged. Cal zip-tied the wrists of the two adults, then motioned to the corner. "Get that thing out." Lena lifted the Mascot suit and laid it across the floor. It had weight to it, a hidden lining of foam and steel mesh. Inside the chest cavity, a small tracking chip embedded near the neck tag. "Looks like a key fob," Lena said. "I can pull it apart." "Do it." She pried the plastic open with a multi-tool. Inside, a miniature transmitter, GPS-enabled, encrypted. "No wonder they could move the kids so quickly," she said. "They're tagging them." Assigning locations in real time, Cal knelt beside one of the kids. The boy was blinking up at the ceiling, lips barely moving. Cal leaned closer. "Water," the boy whispered. He handed over a canteen. The girl sat up with a start when Ranger came close, but didn't pull away when he rested his head gently on her lap. She touched his ears with the kind of caution that came from not knowing kindness. Ranger stayed perfectly still. They got the kids out just before sunrise. The feds didn't arrive. No one did. Cal called in the rescue anonymously through a secure line. By the time local authorities arrived, he and Lena were already gone. So was Ranger. Back in the truck, Lena sat behind the wheel, scanning the tracking chip she'd disabled. I pulled the data. These things don't just send out coordinates. They sync to a larger network, something proprietary. Not satellite-based. Likely peer-to-peer, like a black market mesh net. Cal looked at her. "Meaning? Meaning someone nearby always has to be listening." She turned to him. "We're not just hunting them anymore. We're inside their map," Cal said. In the back seat, Ranger sat upright, eyes locked on the road ahead, silent, steady, watching, waiting. Because he knew. They weren't off the grid. They were inside it now. The envelope had no return address, just a thin strip of tape sealing the flap, and inside, a single sheet of paper. No threat, no manifesto, just a child's drawing in crayon. A cartoonish blue dog with a badge, a stage, a shadowed crowd, and scrawled at the bottom, in shaky block letters, "Next, 0827. Lena read it twice, then passed it across the table. Cal stared at the date. August 27th, 2 days from now. "What's scheduled?" he asked. Lena pulled her laptop closer, already searching. "Valencia County Children's Empowerment Fair. Big local push. County funded. Major sponsors. Tons of press. Where?" "Valencia County Fairgrounds. South Stage. Mascot parade at 4. Family booths. Petting zoo." Cal exhaled through his nose. Perfect cover. Ranger, sitting by the window, let out a low, short breath. Not a growl, just acknowledgement. They didn't wait for the day of. They got to Valencia County a day early and scoped the fairgrounds. Hundreds of tents were already going up. Delivery vans rolled through like clockwork. School buses, vendor trucks. A semi-trailer marked Kiddie Camp Productions unloaded a full rack of Mascot heads onto a wheeled dolly. Foxes, frogs, bears, and a new one, a purple kangaroo with long lashes and glittery eyes. Ranger stared at that one longer than the rest. On the morning of the event, Cal didn't wear a badge. He wore jeans and a weathered ball cap. Ranger walked without a vest, blending in just enough to pass as someone's service dog. Lena stayed mobile, working surveillance from the east side. "Cameras up," she said through the mic. 3 suspicious booths on your north side. No registration. One labeled Play Pal Volunteers. Cal scanned the crowd. Children everywhere. Painted faces. Cotton candy. Laughter. It felt wrong. Too much color over something dark. Ranger tensed. His ears perked, head swiveling toward the main stage. That's when Cal saw it. a man in a kangaroo mascot suit walking awkwardly toward the back of the performance area, away from the crowd. He carried nothing, didn't wave, just moved fast, wobbling toward the rear curtain. Cal followed at a distance. Ranger stuck close, but low. At the side of the stage, near a stack of crates and lighting rigs, the kangaroo turned a corner toward the staff-only zone. Cal signaled Lena. "I've got movement backstage, kangaroo suit, heading for the rear ramp. Copy. No security posted there. You're alone, not quite." Ranger surged forward. Cal followed him around the curtain, then stopped. There, behind a tarp, stood a storage bin. Same as before, oversized, plastic, closed, locked. The mascot was nowhere in sight. Ranger moved slowly toward the bin, nose just inches from the lid. Then he froze. A single bark, loud, commanding. Cal rushed to the bin, drew his blade, and sliced the strap holding it closed. Inside, curled beneath layers of fabric, was a small boy. 5. Duct tape marks around his wrists, eyes open but unfocused. Still alive. Cal scooped him out. The boy flinched, then whimpered softly. "It's okay." Cal whispered. "You're safe." The tarp behind them fluttered. Ranger spun, snarling. A figure ran. Cal didn't think. He passed the boy to a fairground medic who had rushed in from the side and bolted after the runner. Ranger was already ahead of him. They tore through the back alleys of the fair, past trailer doors and supply crates. The suspect was fast, but panicked. Wrong shoes, wrong turns. Ranger gained. The takedown was violent, but clean. He pinned the man against the grass with practiced force, jaws tight on the jacket sleeve, growling low. Cal caught up, cuffing him before he could blink. The man stammered. "I was just delivery." "Just delivery," Cal knelt beside him. "What were you delivering?" The man swallowed hard. "The kid. The code was stamped on the inside of the suit. Tag number 0827J, Lena arrived minutes later with backup. They pulled the tag from inside the mascot head they found near the bins. Same format, same red thread. Inside the lining of the suit was another chip. GPS enabled. But this one was broadcasting on a narrow band frequency, and Lena cracked it on site with a mobile decryptor. "It's linked to a private server," she said. "Owned by a corporate shell based in Luxembourg. This isn't just national anymore." Cal looked down at the boy, now wrapped in a rescue blanket. He wasn't talking, but he was holding Ranger's fur in one hand. Tight. Ranger didn't move, didn't need to. His presence alone told the boy something no adult had ever said out loud. "You're not invisible. You're not forgotten." Later, as paramedics carried the child to a waiting ambulance, Cal sat on the edge of a concrete planter just behind the fair's main tent. Ranger lay at his feet. The crowd hadn't even noticed. The music played on. Kids kept spinning on the Ferris wheel. But for one boy, one whose name no one yet knew, the day had changed everything. Cal scratched behind Ranger's ear. "You ended it," he whispered. Ranger blinked slowly. But Cal knew better. This wasn't the end. This was exposure, and exposure had a price. Back at the truck, Lena handed him a flash drive. Everything from the tracker. GPS logs, timestamps, embedded purchase codes. "You think they'll bury it again?" Lena looked away. "I think we better not give them the chance." Ranger climbed into the truck bed without a word. He sat upright, watching the parking lot like he expected something else to walk out of the dark. And maybe it would. But if it did, he'd be ready. The press conference lasted 11 minutes. Flashbulbs, applause. Local politicians using words like hero and valor. One councilwoman bent to shake Ranger's paw for the cameras, awkward and overly rehearsed. He tolerated it. Barely. Cal stood off to the side, hands in his jacket, pockets, jaw locked. Lena kept her phone in one hand, already tracking media spin. The sheriff gave a bland statement about interagency cooperation, conveniently omitting every part that would have made people actually pay attention. By evening, the story had slipped to the second page, and by the next day it was gone. No national coverage, no follow-up leads, just silence. Cal drove Ranger back to their cabin in the foothills, where the wind sounded more like something you could trust. He poured a coffee, set down the mug, and let his head rest on the table. Ranger sat by the door, staring, not out of habit, out of knowing. The world moved on, but something still waited. 3 days later, a manila envelope arrived. No return address again, but this time the handwriting was careful. Inside, a single folded sheet of white construction paper. A child's drawing. Ranger, in bold crayon, wings stretched behind him like an angel. The lines were clumsy, the colors bled together, but the intention was clear. Across the top, in purple marker, he barked, "That's why I'm here." No signature, just a sticker in the corner, tiny and square, a school logo. Cal scanned it into the system. The girl was real. Age 7. Missing for 4 days last spring. Rescued during an early raid, one of the silent ones. She hadn't spoken since. Until now. Cal handed the paper to Ranger. He didn't sniff it. He stared, like he remembered. Later that night, Lena was at the table with 5 open laptops, headphones in, screens full of location logs, partial plate numbers, burner cell data. "We missed something," she said. Cal looked up. Lena pointed to a cluster of GPS logs tied to the trackers found in the Mascot heads. One of the pins had moved again. Not abandoned, reassigned. Same frequency. "Different route," she said. "And look, 4 stops all at public parks, followed by long stationary times in remote zones. What's the transport?" "That's the thing. Not vans, not trailers." She spun the screen toward him. "School buses." Cal narrowed his eyes. "Real ones?" Lena shook her head. "Not on any public transit logs. I cross-referenced the fleet IDs. 3 of them are fakes. Shell companies registered under private charter schools. All set up in the last 6 months." Ranger let out a quiet exhale. Lena paused. "I think the Mascots were just stage 1. Their scaling." Cal didn't respond right away. He stood, walked to the window, then glanced at the drawing still pinned to the fridge with a magnet. Wings. The girl had given him wings. Not because he flew, because he came when no one else did. Ranger moved beside him, his head tilting slightly toward the refrigerator, then back to Cal. Cal stared into the dark. "We're not done," he said finally. By morning, they were already on the move. They tracked one of the buses to a fuel stop just outside Taos. The driver didn't look like a teacher, nor a driver no license plate on the front, temporary tag on the back. They tailed him. The bus drove for over 2 hours, past town limits, up a winding road to what looked like an abandoned summer camp. From the ridge above, Cal and Lena surveyed the site. 1 bus, 6 cabins, a main lodge, a tower with a broken antenna, and 1 security camera. Just 1. Old trick. "Diversion tactic," Lena said. "Make it look neglected so no one asks questions." Cal raised the binoculars again. Through the smudged windows of the bus, he saw movement. Tiny faces, hands against glass. And on the side of the vehicle, faded lettering, painted over, but still faintly legible under sunlight. Campkind a dead corporation. Shut down 8 years ago, resurrected as a front. Cal turned to Ranger, crouched beside him, tail low but eyes sharp. "You ready?" Ranger didn't blink. He was always ready. They moved in fast. Cal and Lena took the north slope. Ranger circled wide. The driver came out with a clipboard. Walkie at his belt. Ranger didn't bark. Not yet. He waited until Lena kicked the lodge door open, and then he charged. Not to bite, to distract. His sudden appearance drew the second man from the cabin, gun half drawn, just long enough for Cal to slam him into the dirt. The chaos took less than 90 seconds. Inside the bus, 5 children huddled near the floor. One of them saw Ranger through the cracked open door. She crawled forward, stared at him, then smiled. Only then did Ranger bark. Once, short, sharp, final. By the time federal units arrived, the bus was impounded, the kids accounted for, and the camp declared a national crime scene. Lena sat on a folding chair with her laptop balanced on her knees. Cal leaned against a pine tree, arms crossed. Ranger lay between them, ears twitching, but otherwise still. The press would get wind of it. Or not. Didn't matter anymore, he barked. That's why she was there. And somewhere, another envelope would arrive. Another kid would draw wings. Another truth would slip through the cracks of a world that kept trying to look away. But Ranger never did. The forest was still. Not dead, just resting. It was the kind of silence that held memory, not absence. Every leaf, every slow whisper of wind through the trees seemed to remember something. A chase, a rescue, a scream that had been answered, a bark that broke through a darkness no one else could see. Cal sat on the edge of the old wooden porch, coffee untouched beside him. The mug had gone cold. He didn't care. Beside him, Ranger lay with his head on his paws. His body didn't move, but his ears twitched just slightly at the sound of a distant owl or a squirrel shifting weight on bark. He wasn't asleep. He never really slept. Not fully. Not since the war. Not since that desert. Not since he realized that even when you come home, the work doesn't always stop. Lena had left earlier that morning, headed south to testify before the task force. She'd promised she'd be back for winter. But she also knew the weight Cal carried, the kind of burden that doesn't lift with a court decision or a press headline. It had to be lived through, or sat with, quietly, like this. Cal leaned forward and let his elbows rest on his knees. "You know," he said aloud, not looking at Ranger, "they always ask how many kids we saved." He paused. "They never ask how many we didn't get to." Ranger didn't respond, but Cal knew he heard it, felt it, wore it. "That last one." Cal's voice cracked. "I think it got to me more than I thought." Silence. And then Ranger lifted his head. Not a bark, just that shift. That quiet realignment of muscles, like a soldier rising to parade rest. Cal looked down at him, then out toward the tree line. "You heard something, didn't you?" Ranger's ears twitched again. A car door in the distance. Maybe. A voice carried by wind. Maybe nothing. But Ranger didn't believe in maybe. He believed in now. Cal exhaled. "You always stay." Ranger turned his eyes toward him, soft, amber, full of something that could never be explained by instinct or training. Something deeper, like a promise. They sat like that for another hour, and when the sun dipped below the tree line and the sky turned that strange shade of lavender that only happens in October, Cal finally spoke again. "You're not just a dog who barked." He leaned back, staring into the fading sky. "You're the one who stayed when no one else did." A few birds scattered overhead, and Ranger, as if to honor the moment, lifted his chin and let out a single, low bark. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain, like he knew the world still had something worth listening for. Cal smiled, not because things were perfect, but because someone was still listening, still watching, still there. He scratched behind Ranger's ear. "What about you?" he asked, eyes forward, voice steady. "Has anyone, animal or human, ever stayed for you, when no one else did?" The screen could fade to black right there, but maybe, just maybe, it lingers for one last frame, a frame where Ranger, now with a few more silver strands in his fur, stands tall at the edge of the porch, looking out over the forest. not as a pet, not as a weapon, but as the one who barked, and the one who stayed. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone or some dog who never gave up on you, then share it, tell someone, and subscribe to German Shepherd Chronicles, where true loyalty has a name, and every bark might just be the one that saves a life. We tell stories of those who serve without asking, those who stay, just like Ranger.